Welcome to the lair of the Batty Boffin.
Hi there Batty fans, welcome back to another video all about surds. Now in earlier videos we learned about how we can split these square roots across a multiply or divide, so here are a few to have a go at. We'll work through these ones together and then you can have a go at some on your own. So for start off we've got the square root of 144. Now you might already know that one, but we're going to work through it anyway. We're going to split 144, just in case you don't happen to know the square root of it, into some convenient things. Now, there's a few ways we could split this. Obviously, we could do 2 times 72, but that doesn't really help us because 2 is not a square and 72 is not a square. So we could split it into 4 lots of 36, or indeed we could also have split it into 9 lots of 16, I think. Yep, that's right, 9 lots of 16. Either of those is fine. We'll just follow both of them through. This one, when we split that square root, becomes the square root of 4 times by the square root of 36. And this one becomes the square root of 9 times the square root of 16. Hopefully you should be able to finish stuff from there, so just pause the video and fill in what comes next. Okay, pause now. Welcome back. For the square root of 9 times the square root of 16, we should have had 3 times 4, which is 12. And for the square root of 4 times the square root of 36, we should have had 2 times 6, which stunningly is also 12. Amazing, isn't it? Either of those is fine. So that's just some recap on splitting them over the multiplies. Now this second one, frankly most people would look at doing the square root of 2 1/4 in your head with utter terror, but it's not as bad as it seems. What I'd like you to do is to rewrite this as a top heavy fraction. Instead of 2 1/4, fill in the numbers that come here. Okay, pause the video and do that now. Okay, you should have 9 over 4, which then of course splits into the square root of 9 over the square root of 4, which is 3 over 2, or 1 1/2. And you can just check that out. 1 1/2 times 1 1/2 is in fact 2 1/4. If you don't believe me, get it on a calculator. Okay, last one. These ones all turned out to be nice square numbers in them. You know, we had square numbers here, square numbers everywhere. This last one doesn't all go down into square numbers, into ordinary numbers. There's still a square root left in there somewhere. So for this one, we're going to split it. Different ways you can split 45. You could split it into 3 times 15, but that doesn't really help because 3 doesn't simplify. Well, square root of 3 doesn't simplify and square root of 15 doesn't simplify. So for you to do is to work out what to split that into, something times something, such that at least 1 is a square. Okay, pause the video, do that now. Righty-ho, you should have 5 9s are 45, with 9 being a square. So when we split that, we get root 5 times root 9, which, writing it with the number at the front and the surd at the end, comes out to 3 root 5. 3 root 5, and that's how we'd write it in surd form. Okay, time for you to talk amongst yourselves for about 3 seconds while I speedily wipe this board off, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch to have a go at, so I'll see you in a couple of seconds. Here we are ready to go. Right, we've got 4 questions here. Square root of 32, square root of 0.64, I'll give you a hint about that one, square root of 75, and this disgusting looking thing at the bottom. Now, talking through each of them, this first one here is one way you might have attacked that. You might have said that square root of 32 is 4 times 8. So we split that, square root of 4 times square root of 8, and we end up with 2 root 8. Now that is true, 2 root 8 is the square root of 32, but you can go further and you're always expected to simplify as much as you can. So when you do this one, don't use 4 times 8 because there's a better one you can use. You can tell that because when you get to the end you end up with root 8, and root 8 simplifies again. I mean, if you start off with that, you can always just do the whole process again and simplify root 8. So you need to start off with something other than 4 times 8 in there. For this one, you might think, how am I supposed to do the square root of a decimal? Well, you can always write that as a fraction. 0.64 can be written as something over something, and they're both squares. For this one here, square root of 75, that just simply splits up into something root something. I think you'll find that one quite easy. There's not many things that 75 splits into. And this last one, oh my word, but it's not as bad as it looks. Actually, it probably is as bad as it looks, but we can do it, bit by bit. First of all, we're going to simplify the top bit. Now, normally simplifying has meant going from a big number in the square root into something square root something, little bits. Here we're actually going to go the opposite way. I'd like you to turn that top thing into one big square root over root 40. You should then find there's a little bit of simplifying goes on there, and it cancels down nicely, and eventually you should end up with number over root something. Okay, so that's the format we want it in. Pause the video and have a go at those now. Welcome back. Here's what we should be having. Root 32, it's better if you split that up into 2 times 16. 16 being the biggest square thing we can get out of that. Root 16 times root 2 turns that into 4 root 2, which is the same as the answer we had just before the break, but it's a better way of writing it. You've got the most you can in that square root. For this one here, we're going to write 0.64 as 64 over 100. That then splits into root 64 over root 100, which is 8 over 10, or if you like, 0.8. And 0.8 times 0.8 is 0.64, so that works. This one down here, that's pretty easy because there's not very many ways of splitting 75. So that splits into root of 3 times 25. We square root that, we get 5. We square root that, we get root 3. So that's 5 root 3. I'm just missing off a stage there, I hope that's okay. Last one, bit by bit. So the top line, 2 root 5. Well, I'm going to write 2 as root 4. So we've got root 4 times root 5, whole thing over root 40. So root 4 times root 5, that's root 20 over root 40. I'm going to run out of room here, I'm going to have to start writing smaller. Root 20 over root 40, that is one big square root of 20 over 40. 20 over 40, I'm going to have to compress this here, is 1/2. And you might not think that goes any further, but there is actually a square there. It's the 1. So we can write that as the square root of 1 over the square root of 2. And the square root of 1 is 1. So all in all, we end up with 1 over root 2. Wow. I'll just go through that again. To simplify things, we've actually expanded the square root of that. We wrote the 2 as root 4. And then we combined these two, using the multiplying combining things. Root 4 times root 5 is equal to root 20. Then we combine these using the divide rule. Root 20 over root 40 is the same as root of 20 over 40. 20 over 40 is 1/2, so we write it as root 1/2. And again we can split the tops and the bottoms and end up with 1 over root 2.